They're busy playing chess, not realizing the board, the rules, and the end game were all designed with your victory already sealed. You weren't in the game, you were the game. That's the part that's frying their mind right now. They thought they were moving pieces, but didn't realize you were the table they laid their illusion on. They thought they were smart, scheming in secret, thinking their manipulation was mastery, thinking silence meant submission. But now, the truth is swallowing their confidence whole because you already won, and they're just realizing they were always 5 moves too late. Before we go any deeper, do this right now. Hit that like button if your spirit is already vibrating with this message. Subscribe if you've ever had to sit quiet in a room full of snakes while pretending not to see the venom. When you do that, you're not just helping this message spread. You're signaling to the platform that this frequency needs to reach every chosen one who's been underestimated, overlooked, and silenced for too long. They're out there thinking they're alone, and we're here to remind them you're not isolated, you're being activated. Let's lock in. They're trying to checkmate you in a game they didn't even realize you retired from. The moment they started pulling strings, they thought you were trapped. But they didn't know that while they were drawing boxes, you were bending the space around it. They thought they were setting traps, but all they did was reveal their own limitation. You were never one of the pieces. You were the pattern they couldn't decode. You were the energy that made the whole illusion work. And now that you've pulled it back, their schemes are falling apart like paper in a storm. That's what's haunting them, that the game never really included you. You let them believe it did. You let them perform, plot, whisper. You let them think they were winning, but it was all theater. You weren't reacting because you weren't invested. You weren't losing, you were watching. And now that you've stepped out of the audience and into your awareness, the stage is burning. They're still making moves in a match that ended the second you stopped pretending to be a player. This is what the power of being chosen looks like. It's not loud, it's not always dramatic. It doesn't demand attention, but it commands outcomes. It haunts the insecure because it reflects what they'll never have. Alignment without performance. Presence without ego. Power without needing permission. Your glow doesn't scream, it pierces. Your calm doesn't beg, it exposes. You didn't walk in to take over the game. You are the reminder that the game was never real to begin with. And let's make one thing crystal. This isn't arrogance. This is awareness. This is what happens when a chosen one stops explaining themselves and starts embodying the truth. When you stop playing along, stop shrinking, stop giving your enemies the benefit of your silence, the whole system collapses. They didn't fear your noise, they feared your knowing. They feared that the day you woke up would be the day their illusion died. And now they're standing in the funeral of their own narrative, confused as hell about how it all flipped. So if you're feeling that pull in your gut right now, like this message isn't just content, but confirmation, stay locked in. Because this isn't hype, this is alignment, and what's coming next is the unraveling, not of you, but of everything they built on the assumption that you'd stay sleeping. But you didn't. You woke up. And now that you've stopped pretending, they're panicking because they're trying to checkmate someone who already owns the board. So before we flip the board and break this down layer by layer, drop the number 77 in the comments if you're done playing along with people who thought your silence meant surrender. That one simple number tells the algorithm what your enemies hoped you'd never do. Rise in plain sight. When you comment, like, and subscribe, you're not just supporting content. You're helping this message reach every chosen one still stuck in rooms they've already outgrown. It's not about going viral, it's about going vital. The universe is making this frequency unavoidable. You're part of that shift. And now, let's walk through it, move by move. If you're really chosen, you won't just hear these words. You'll feel them rearranging your reality. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a breakdown. It's a revelation. You'll never look at their little game the same way again. Number 1, they moved their pawns while you became the board. They moved their pawns like masters of strategy, not realizing you weren't standing on the board. You were the board. And now, every move they made just highlighted how far beneath you they really were. That's what they can't stomach right now. The fact that all their scheming, all their whispered alliances, all their ego-fueled strategies were built on the assumption that you were too slow to see it coming. They thought they were playing a clever game, drawing you in, cornering you, pressuring you. But they didn't realize you don't get cornered when the walls were built from your own vision. You were never inside their system. You let them think you were. That's the sting. Every manipulation they orchestrated, every fake compliment, every conversation held behind your back was a calculated move. But here's the truth. You saw the whole layout. You let them play. You let them move their pawns while you sat in silence, already seeing 20 steps ahead. And now they're sweating in a game they were so proud of starting, because it's becoming clear you already finished it before they knew they were being watched. They wanted to believe you were naive. That's the lie they clung to. It made them feel strong. It made them feel clever. But what's eating them alive now is that all this time you knew, you watched, you calculated. You didn't react because you weren't trying to survive their trap. You were letting it collapse on its own. They moved pawns with pride. You moved in purpose. And here's where the universe shows off. The power of being chosen doesn't mean playing their game better. It means the game breaks down in your presence. You weren't sent to compete with deception. You were sent to expose it. You weren't built to impress them. You were built to interrupt them. Your very existence is the glitch in their matrix. That's why they flinch now. That's why their alliances are crumbling. That's why their smiles look stiff, because the mask they wore to mock you doesn't fit anymore in your light. Think about it. How many times have you felt like the fool for staying quiet, for not clapping back, for watching people move dirty and wondering if the universe forgot you? You didn't fold. You absorbed. You studied. You tracked patterns, energy, intention. You weren't weak. You were letting them walk straight into the consequence of their own illusion. That's what chosen ones do. And if you ever doubted that, look at the history books. Einstein was called slow as a child. They thought his silence meant deficiency. Tesla laughed at, brushed off. He spoke about energy and frequencies before people even had the language for it. Oprah was fired from her first TV job because she was unfit for television. Do you see the pattern? The world ridicules what it doesn't recognize and fears what it can't control. But the chosen? We don't argue with ignorance. We outlive it until it bows. So if you're asking yourself, why didn't I expose them when I had the chance? Why did I stay quiet for so long? Understand this, you weren't late. You were letting them finish the rope. The universe gave you silence, not as punishment, but as permission. Permission to observe without distraction. Permission to build your power while they danced in their delusion. Because now you don't even have to speak. Your existence is the answer to every lie they told. And let's talk about their panic. That panic you're sensing now, that frantic shift in their behavior, their tone, their sudden change of heart. That's not growth. It's fear. Fear of your awareness. Fear of your glow. Fear that the one they thought was checkmate is actually the architect of the entire game. And let them panic. Let them drown in the silence they laughed at. They thought they were building power, But all they did was build your stage. They moved pawns, thinking you were the opponent. But you weren't sitting across the board, you were watching from above. They plotted in small rooms, but you were working with the universe. That's the difference. They had tactics. You had alignment. They had schemes. You had strategy woven into your soul. That's not something you learn. That's something you are. And now they're realizing it too late. They built their confidence on your perceived ignorance, and now that illusion is cracking like thin glass under pressure. What they thought was weakness was actually focus. What they assumed was confusion was actually vision. And now they're realizing you weren't behind, you were undercover. Quote this in your spirit. They plotted squares, you built dimensions. That's what it means to be chosen. You don't just survive schemes, you transcend them. You don't retaliate with noise, you retaliate with presence. You don't fight for position, you walk in purpose. And now that purpose is becoming the storm they can't control. They never expected you to rise without their validation. They never expected your silence to end in strength. But here you are, calm, clear, unbothered. And that chosen one is more powerful than any move they ever made. So if your spirit is still wrestling with doubt, let this be your reminder. You are not a piece on their board. You are the reason the board exists. And the moment you stopped shrinking to fit their frame, the whole illusion collapsed. That's why they're scrambling now. Not because you're loud, but because you're awake. And there's no strategy in the world that can stop a chosen one who remembers who they are. They moved their pawns, but you became the board. And now they're realizing that wasn't smart. Number 2. They mistook your pause for panic. Now the silence is screaming. They saw you step back and thought the storm was over. They watched you fall quiet, go inward, vanish from their petty little circles, and they cheered, quietly, arrogantly, foolishly. They whispered behind fake smiles, "We've got them." Finally, they assumed your stillness meant surrender, that your silence was the sound of you breaking. But they were dead wrong. You weren't crumbling, you were crystallizing. While they danced on your name and laughed behind your back, they didn't know they were mocking a caterpillar mid-transformation. See, only people addicted to noise assume silence means defeat. Only the insecure assume absence means irrelevance. But those who are chosen know the truth. Stillness is where the universe sharpens its weapons. And you were becoming sharper than they'll ever be ready for. They fed their ego while you fed your spirit. They filled rooms with shallow noise while you filled your silence with fire. And now the fire's coming to collect. Because that pause you took, that wasn't collapse. That was realignment. That wasn't fear. That was foresight. Your pause was prophecy. And now that the silence has ended, it's echoing louder than all their noise combined. Your silence isn't absence. It's the sound of destiny loading. Let that line sit with you, chosen one. Your silence was the loading screen of your becoming. It wasn't the void. It was the vault. While they were busy mistaking you for the past version of yourself, the next version was unlocking. They were so busy celebrating your setback that they missed your setup. That's what happens when clowns think the curtain closing is the end of the show. They don't realize it's just the scene change. And now they're panicking because what once felt like control is now chaos. You're back, but not the you they remember. You returned with clarity in your eyes, fire in your walk, and no tolerance for games. You didn't rise with noise. You rose with certainty, and certainty terrifies cowards. Your energy doesn't chase anymore, it commands. Your presence doesn't beg to be seen. It's undeniable. And their masks, they're melting under the heat of your return. This is the part that makes their stomach turn. You didn't even clap back. You didn't need to. You let silence do what it does best. Expose the unworthy. You didn't scream. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't run around trying to prove you were right. You just paused, and in that pause, you did more damage than 1,000 arguments ever could, because your transformation spoke for you. And now that it's loud, they can't unhear it. So if you're sitting there asking, did I waste time being silent? No, you weaponized time. You repurposed pain. You took what was meant to break you and used it as a blueprint. They underestimated the value of your pause because they've never experienced the depth of your purpose. Let them sit in their discomfort now. Let them squirm in the noise of their own lies. Because the silence they once mocked is now screaming truths they can't run from. Number 3, you left the game. Now they're playing against ghosts. They're still swinging, still scheming, still trying to win, still trying to provoke you into another round of drama, another emotional response, another trap disguised as conversation. They think you're still locked in a game that's already over. What they don't understand, what they refuse to accept, is that you left the game the moment you realized the prize was beneath you. They're arguing with a version of you that doesn't even exist anymore. They're rehearsing comebacks, planning chess moves, pulling strings for an opponent who's already transcended the board. You're not reacting because you're not even in the room they think they've trapped you in. That's the part that's driving them insane. That's why they're getting more desperate, more erratic, more performative, because you became unreachable, and they're still screaming into a void, hoping the old you will show up and play one more round. But the old you is gone, the reactive you, the doubting you, the one who tolerated their manipulation, who second-guessed your worth, who stayed in the arena just to prove a point. That version of you died in silence. And what rose in its place? Strategy, vision, stillness that cuts deeper than noise ever could. You left the battlefield, not because you lost, but because you saw how small the war really was. They're swinging in shadows, trying to pin a phantom, but the real you outgrew the battlefield. They're haunted now, haunted by the power of your detachment, haunted by the fact that they can't reach you, haunted by the way your glow is growing while their chaos is collapsing. And they hate it. They hate that they still think about you, while you barely remember the sound of their voice. That's what happens when people build entire personalities around controlling you, only to find out you don't live in their narrative anymore. Chosen one, understand this. They need your participation to maintain their illusion of power. They need your attention to stay relevant. And now that you've pulled the plug, the illusion is glitching. They're talking to ghosts now. And ghosts don't answer back. So when they try to bait you with passive aggression, don't respond. When they try to remind you of who you used to be, just smile. When they gather in circles to dissect your growth like it's a threat, let them. Because while they're wasting energy trying to decode a version of you that's long gone, you're building worlds they'll never be invited into. This is your proof of evolution, that you no longer need revenge, reaction, or recognition. You left the game, and now they're shadowboxing their own insecurities, hoping you'll step back into the ring to validate their fantasy. But the truth, you've already won. And they're stuck playing a match with memories, while your presence is now reserved for purpose. Let them swing, let them shout, let them try to summon the old you. But the only thing they're hitting now is air. Number 4, they built their power on your distraction. Now your focus is fire. They never had real power, not once, not for a moment. They just got good at keeping you distracted. They didn't grow, they just fed off your scattered energy, your emotional exhaustion, your need to fix what should have been walked away from. Every time they poked you, provoked you, twisted a narrative, or planted a seed of doubt, it wasn't strategy, it was survival. They needed you disoriented, because as long as you were distracted, they felt dominant. That's the part they won't say out loud. Their whole confidence was built on you not being fully locked in. They misread your compassion as confusion. They saw your emotional processing as weakness. They believed they were in control because they could pull your strings and make you react. But now they're gasping in a space that used to be held up by your presence. They thought they were winning, when in reality, they were just renting power from your energy field. And that rent just expired. You pulled your focus back, and the shift was seismic. You stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped chasing clarity from people committed to distortion. And the second you stopped bleeding energy into their dysfunction, their whole illusion began to collapse. Because you weren't their enemy, you were their electricity, and now the lights are off. Let that settle in. They never wanted your destruction. They wanted your distraction. As long as you were fragmented, as long as your attention was pulled in 1,000 directions trying to decode their chaos, they felt like kings and queens of a game they didn't even know how to play. But now your silence has become a blade. Your calm has become a boundary. Your focus, it's a wildfire they can't contain. You're no longer reacting, you're creating, you're building, you're evolving, and that terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. They don't fear your voice, they fear your direction. They fear the way your energy now pours into vision, into purpose, into alignment. Because they know the same power they used to exploit is now fueling something far greater, and they're not part of it. Look around. Look at how their mask is slipping. Look at how the alliances they built on your distraction are falling apart. Look at how loud they've become now that you've gone quiet. That's not strength. That's panic. That's not control. That's collapse. Because your focus was the glue, and now that you've reclaimed it, they're stuck trying to build power out of pieces they never owned to begin with. Chosen one, this is your moment to remember. Your attention is sacred. Your energy is a throne. And when you give it to clowns, they'll throw a circus. But when you give it to purpose, the whole universe shifts in your favor. You weren't made to manage egos. You were made to move dimensions. Let them choke on the silence. Let them tremble in the absence of your energy. You're not lost. You're laser focused. And that focus, it's the fire that burns everything fake to ash. Number 5. Chosen one, stop apologizing for winning before they started. You keep second-guessing your glow because the room looks uncomfortable. You're shrinking your shine because others are just now waking up to a path you already finished walking in silence. Let's get this straight once and for all. You didn't move too fast. They showed up late. And now they're bitter, not because you cheated, but because you saw clearly while they were still playing pretend. They never thought you'd get this far. They weren't planning on seeing you win, especially not without their approval. They called you too deep, too intense, too much, not because you were wrong, but because you were right before it was popular. You had blueprint vision in a world still fumbling with crayons. And instead of asking how you saw what they missed, they tried to shame you into silence. They tried to twist your intuition into arrogance, your clarity into pride, because the truth is, your awareness exposed their delay. And that exposure, it haunts them. You didn't skip steps. You were the staircase they pretended didn't exist. They mocked what they didn't understand. That's what insecure people do when your frequency threatens their fantasy. They watched you walk through darkness, make sense of chaos, stand still in the middle of betrayal. And they told themselves it was luck. They needed that lie to protect their ego. because admitting the truth would mean admitting they never saw what you saw, that they never carried what you carried, that they weren't built with your blueprint. So now that your elevation is undeniable, now that your wins are showing, now that your silence has turned into success, now that your vision is manifesting in real time, they're scrambling for explanations. But you don't owe them any. You don't owe them your backstory, your breakdowns, your battle scars. They had their chance to walk with you, but they chose to watch instead. And now they attack. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something they didn't believe was possible without them. They're not mad at your victory. They're mad that you didn't ask them for permission to get there. They can't reconcile how someone they once dismissed is now the standard they're secretly measuring themselves against. So stop apologizing, stop softening your words, stop hiding your gifts so others can feel more secure in their excuses. The truth is, you were designed with a head start for a reason. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to become the mirror they couldn't escape. That's why they lash out. That's why they whisper. Because your rise is revealing their stagnation. Your clarity is confronting their confusion. You're not too early. You're right on divine time. They're just not used to seeing someone move without seeking validation. That's not your problem. That's their awakening. And some people would rather attack the light than admit they stayed in the dark by choice. So, chosen one, walk unapologetically. Don't explain the vision to people who weren't given the blueprint. Don't slow your pace for those who refuse to start the race. Your very presence is a prophecy, and no amount of bitterness can undo what you were born to become. Keep climbing, even if they pretend the stairs don't exist, because deep down, they know who built them. Number 6. They called it a game. You called it a test. They stepped in with egos inflated, smiles sharp, and strategies stitched together from fear and insecurity. They thought this was a game, that if they played it well enough, manipulated enough, outshouted and outshined enough, they could win something. They showed up to compete, convinced the crown would go to whoever made the most noise, the boldest moves, or the dirtiest plays. But here's what they didn't realize: you weren't playing to win. You were walking through to graduate. You didn't come to impress the crowd. You didn't come to clap back. You didn't come to collect trophies made of shallow praise and temporary applause. You came to complete something greater, to fulfill alignment, to break generational chains, to outlive lies with purpose. This wasn't a game for you. It was a test of evolution, and while they were keeping score, you were keeping alignment. While they were setting traps on the floor, you were already flying over the arena. That's why they missed you. That's why their schemes fell flat. They built weapons and waited for you to walk into them, not realizing you'd already risen above the battlefield. They were on the ground with fake smiles and hidden motives, trying to play chess with someone who'd already dismantled the board. They thought they were running the show, but couldn't see that you were watching from a place they couldn't reach. Where your peace isn't a pause, it's a position. Let's be clear, competition is for people who think power is limited, who think there's only one seat at the table, one spotlight, one path. But you were never one of them. You don't chase validation because your presence is the proof. You don't beg to be chosen because you already are. You don't fight for relevance because you were born with resonance. You don't play games with clowns when you were sent to flip the entire circus. And the test wasn't about whether you could win in their world. It was whether you could stay aligned in the face of sabotage, manipulation, projection, and betrayal. It was about whether you could keep your center when the enemy kept trying to knock you off balance. It was whether you could see the trap and choose not to walk into it, even if that meant walking alone. And you did. You passed. They still don't understand how you're ahead without playing the game. It bothers them deeply because your progress didn't come through politics or popularity. It came through presence, through clarity, through choosing purpose when you could have chosen pettiness, through mastering the quiet art of self-control while they screamed for attention. And now their game looks ridiculous next to your evolution. Chosen one, let this be your reminder. You were never here to compete. You were here to complete. Complete a mission, complete a transformation, complete the cycle they thought would never break. You came to be the shift. And now, the very ones who thought they were winning are realizing they were never even in the same league. They called it a game because that's the only language they know. But you speak alignment. You move in silence and shake atmospheres. You bend timelines by simply existing in truth. You walk into rooms and everything changes, not because you're loud, but because you're activated. Let them keep playing. You've already passed the test. Number 7. They laughed when you lost pieces, but you were sacrificing for position. They laughed when you lost pieces, but you were sacrificing for position. They thought it was over when you lost that job, when you walked away from that relationship, when you disconnected from that circle. They saw your silence, your losses, your stripped-down seasons, and laughed like it meant you were finished. They measured your worth by what you had to let go of, not realizing that every piece you gave up was a deliberate move toward power. They saw your sacrifices as stumbles, but what they didn't know is that you were sacrificing for position, not approval. While they were obsessed with looking like winners, you were becoming one in silence. They clowned your struggle because they didn't have the vision to see your strategy. They thought they were watching you fall apart, but what they were really witnessing was you making divine space for something bigger than anything they've ever known. Let them celebrate your losses. Let them post their wins and wave their temporary trophies. Let them gossip about your silence because you knew something they didn't. True transformation often requires subtraction. You didn't lose pieces. You released weight. You weren't left behind. You let go of what couldn't follow. That wasn't a fall from grace. It was a fall into alignment. You lost a piece, but they forgot what happens when a pawn reaches the other side. You become royalty. This is the part that shakes them to their core. They thought your sacrifice was permanent. They thought your pain would paralyze you. They thought your isolation meant elimination. But just like in chess, you knew the rules better than they did. You were never just a pawn, you were purpose in disguise. And now, you're reaching the other side. And royalty doesn't need to announce itself. It arrives, and everything shifts. Every loss was a repositioning. Every delay was divine timing. Every goodbye was protection. They thought you were being stripped, but you were being refined. The gold was always underneath. And now that you're rising, they're starting to remember all the pieces you dropped and realizing you don't even need them anymore. They counted your struggle as evidence that you were failing. But failure doesn't look like falling. It looks like quitting. And you never quit. You endured. You recalculated. You recentered. That's why they can't touch you now. Because the version of you they mocked is the same version that built this one. The version that walks like royalty, speaks with clarity, and no longer apologizes for making calculated moves they'll never understand. Chosen one, hear this. Not everyone will understand your silence, your sacrifices, or your strategy. And that's okay, because they laughed when you lost pieces. But now, they're watching you rise with fewer people, stronger energy, and clearer vision. And it's haunting them. You're not bitter, you're just built different. So keep letting them misread your setbacks. Let them count your losses, because while they're busy keeping score, you're crossing the board. And the moment you arrive, you don't just win, you transform, you ascend, you become royalty. Number 8. They fed off your doubt. Now your certainty starves them. They fed off your doubt. Now your certainty starves them. Let's speak directly. Chosen one to chosen one. You've spent too long questioning your light because it made others squint. You let their discomfort become your burden. You let their silence become your self-doubt. But it's time to remember, you weren't too much. They were too small to handle what you carry. They didn't just doubt you, they needed you to doubt yourself, because as long as you questioned your worth, they got to feel powerful in your shadow. As long as you were unsure, insecure, or apologetic, they had control. They shaped the narrative. They whispered just loud enough to destabilize you. They subtly excluded you, mocked your depth, twisted your intuition into paranoia, and called your clarity crazy. They didn't want you to believe in yourself, because the moment you did, their illusion would collapse. And now, that moment has come, the moment you stopped waiting for permission, the moment you stepped into the truth that you were never too intense. You were just never meant to dilute your fire for people who live in fog. They fed off your doubt like parasites, draining your confidence, your clarity, your direction. But now your certainty is starving them. You've become untouchable because you've become undeniable. You thought you were alone, but you were never alone. You were exclusive. The universe isolated you not to punish you, but to prepare you, to pull you out of noise so you could hear your calling without the distortion of opinions that never mattered. That isolation wasn't rejection, it was refinement. It was sacred space. It was the cocoon that looked like a grave but held the rebirth they never saw coming. They didn't leave you behind. The universe pulled you ahead. And now that you've stopped shrinking, your glow is burning through every mask they built to hide their own mediocrity. They can't manipulate you anymore. Your clarity terrifies them. Your certainty silences their projection. Because once you remember who you are, you can never be controlled again. They don't want you healed. They don't want you confident. They want you questioning everything because your hesitation gave them dominance. Your second guessing gave them power. But now you're moving like someone who knows the truth. And the truth doesn't bend for anyone. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them try to drag your name back to the version of you that doubted everything. That version no longer exists. And the emptiness they feel, it's not your absence, it's the loss of access. You are not the problem. You are the proof that alignment outlives manipulation, that silence builds power, that real ones don't need to perform to be powerful. You're not asking to be seen anymore because your existence now demands it. So stop apologizing, stop explaining, stop doubting. You are the frequency they can't fake, and now your certainty is exposing their performance. You didn't outgrow them because you changed. You outgrew them because they never moved. And now the distance feels divine because it is. You're not too much. You're not alone. You're not behind. You're chosen. And now that you know it, they're starving in the silence your confidence created. Number 9. The board flipped, and so did the power. They really thought they had you boxed in. Piece by piece, they maneuvered around you with fake smiles and calculated silence, confident they were backing you into a corner. They underestimated you so badly, they convinced themselves your silence was surrender, your humility was hesitation, and your kindness was weakness. Every move they made was designed to trap you, emotionally, mentally, energetically. But what they never considered was this: you don't get trapped when you were never playing by their rules in the first place. You watched them build strategy like it was scripture, stacking lies on top of manipulation, betrayal masked as concern, alliances built on shared illusions. They were smug, certain, blindly convinced they had the upper hand because they saw you quiet, saw you distant, saw you unfazed. But now they're standing in the rubble of their own strategies, choking on the dust of a kingdom they tried to build on your silence. And here's the twist that haunts them most. The board didn't just reset, it flipped. And when it did, their masks fell with it. You see, chosen ones don't play to dominate. We live to transcend. We don't move out of ego. We move out of evolution. We don't clap back because our glow already does the talking. And while they were making short-term plays for validation, you were aligning with purpose. You weren't obsessed with winning, you were focused on rising. That's why your path now glows while theirs crumbles. Because you didn't invest in the game, you outgrew it. They played to dominate, you lived to transcend. One was temporary, the other eternal. They played to be kings and queens of illusions. You moved like a soul that understood the assignment before the game even began. They wanted to own you, silence you, outshine you. But your presence isn't something they could ever possess or dim. Because your power didn't come from position, it came from alignment. And that's what flipped everything. Now they're exposed. The very strategies they used are now turning against them. The alliances they built are unraveling. The rooms they controlled now echo with the absence of your energy. They can't hide behind performance anymore. The game is done, the show is over, and the light is on. And in that light, every mask they wore is melting. Every lie they told now echoes back at them without a place to hide. And the best part, you didn't even have to do much. You didn't scream. You didn't fight dirty. You just stood still and let time do what truth always does: expose. You didn't flip the board in anger. You let the universe do it in divine timing. And now the same people who thought they had power are learning the difference between manipulation and mastery. Chosen one, let this sit in your spirit. You were never losing. You were letting the game reveal itself. And now that it has, your energy has shifted, your alignment is intact, and the board they once controlled is nothing but scattered pieces beneath your feet. You don't have to explain yourself. You just have to keep walking, because now they're the ones playing in a reality they no longer control. The power flipped when you stopped reacting. The game ended when you stopped participating. And now the board is yours, not to play on, but to rise above. Number 10. They performed for applause. You built for alignment. They performed for applause. You built for alignment. Spotlights, applause, validation. That's what they were chasing while you were building in silence. They wanted the stage, the followers, the admiration, even if it meant faking every part of themselves to get it. And for a while, it worked. They were loud, visible, celebrated, performing for anyone who would clap loud enough to distract them from their lack of substance. But while they were collecting attention like currency, you were collecting truth like armor. They were chasing applause, you were chasing purpose. And now that your purpose is manifesting, they're realizing that clout can't compete with clarity. They worked hard to be seen, you worked hard to become. And that difference? That's what's haunting them now. Because no matter how loud they get, your silence is still what people remember. While they were performing, you were aligning. While they were rehearsing for approval, you were realigning with the universe. They thought you were being quiet because you had nothing to say. They didn't know you were being precise. They thought you weren't moving because they couldn't see the work. But you weren't standing still. You were going deep. And now the roots you built in isolation are producing a foundation they can't shake. They made noise, you became frequency. Now your silence vibrates through every room they thought they owned. That's why they flinch now. That's why their smiles seem forced, their energy nervous. Because they know deep down, you didn't need the stage to become impactful. You didn't need applause to become powerful. You didn't need the crowd to validate what the universe had already confirmed in your spirit. You didn't have to raise your voice to raise the vibration. Your stillness carries more weight than their loudest performances ever could. And now their act is unraveling. The same people who once laughed at your focus are now studying your discipline. The same ones who dismissed your silence are now echoing your words. But they can't copy alignment. They can't mimic divinity. They can only perform near it and hope nobody notices the difference. But the world is starting to see, because the applause they used to live for, it's dying down. And your presence, quiet, certain, unwavering, is starting to shake the very foundations they built their identity on. You're not here to impress, you're here to impact. You're not here to fit the mold, you're here to shatter it. And you don't need a stage to do that. You just need alignment. Alignment with your truth, your calling, your design. That's what you were building when they thought you were losing. And now that the results are showing, they're learning the hard way. Performances fade, but purpose echoes. Chosen one, stop questioning the pace of your path just because others ran faster toward nothing. Your stillness was never stagnation, it was precision. Your silence wasn't absence, it was presence concentrated. While they built platforms out of ego, you became a force the universe moves through. Let them keep performing. You're the frequency they'll never match. Number 11. Let them play. You already own the victory lap. Let them keep scheming. Let them plot in the shadows, whisper behind curtains, move pawns in circles, and think they're orchestrating your downfall. Let them rehearse comebacks to battles you're not even attending. Let them scramble for relevance in a game that the universe already ended in your favor. Because here's the cold truth they're finally starting to feel. You already won, and now they're burning energy trying to undo what's already been sealed in alignment. They're still playing the game, still trying to trigger you, trap you, test you, but you've transcended the entire board. You're not playing to prove anymore. You're not playing to win, because you are the win. You don't need their reactions. You don't need their validation. You don't need to check their moves, because you're already on your victory lap, and they're running in circles trying to catch up to a moment that's already passed. You didn't just survive, you became the scoreboard. That's what they can't process. You didn't just make it through. You didn't just get by. You flipped the dynamic. Now your glow is the reminder. Your presence is the consequence. Your energy is the scoreboard. And every time they see you evolve, elevate, or simply exist unbothered, it reminds them they lost long before they knew a game had even started. You were never racing them. You were running through fire to become. While they were busy chasing attention, you were becoming the standard. While they measured wins with claps, likes, and surface-level performances, you measured yours in alignment, peace, purpose, and undeniable transformation. They don't understand how you're still standing, stronger, clearer, brighter, after everything they did to break you, but that's because they never understood the laws of the chosen. We don't rise in spite of the attacks, we rise because of them. The same pressure they hoped would destroy you only forged the version of you they never saw coming. And now they're haunted by that glow they tried to dim, by that fire they tried to smother, by the fact that their best strategy still failed, because what you carry can't be touched by ego-built agendas. So let them keep going. Let them spin their stories. Let them keep posting for attention while you keep walking in intention. You're not even looking back, not because you're petty, but because you're done. You've outgrown the conversations, the dynamics, the cycles, the noise, and now they're left playing alone, trying to provoke someone who no longer even lives in that dimension. They never expected you to win quietly, but you did. They never expected you to rise without fighting, but you did. They never expected your peace to be the loudest revenge, but it is. Chosen one, walk your victory lap like the air can't deny you, like the universe already paved the road beneath your feet, because it did. You're not just winning, you're walking in proof. Let them play their small games. Let them chase shadows. You've got nothing left to prove, because you're no longer on the board. You are the scoreboard, and the game is already over. And just like that, the game they thought you were still playing has revealed its truth. You were never a piece. You were always the power. Let them keep chasing illusions. You're walking in completion. The board is flipped. The game is over. And you? You're the reminder. If this message hit your spirit like a truth you always knew but never heard out loud, like this video, subscribe to stay tapped into this chosen frequency, and drop the number 77 in the comments if you're done playing small. Share this with another chosen one, because the victory is ours now.